No waitress could serve him, until one waitress shocked the billionaire CEO. The man arrived just before sunset, when the restaurant was busiest and most tiring. Cars filled the small parking lot, and the sound of plates, voices, and clinking glasses spilled out through the open door. Inside, the place smelled of fried food, warm bread, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. It was not a fancy restaurant. It was the kind of place people came to after work, wearing tired faces and loose clothes, looking for comfort rather than style. The man paused at the entrance for a moment. He was tall, but his shoulders were slightly bent, as if the weight of the day had pressed him down. His jacket was plain and a little worn at the edges. His shoes were clean but old. Nothing about him stood out, and that was exactly the problem. In a place where waitresses learned to judge customers in seconds, he looked like trouble. Not loud trouble, not angry trouble, but the kind that stayed too long, asked too many questions, and left too little money behind. He chose a small table near the corner, away from the window. He sat down quietly and folded his hands, waiting. Around him, the restaurant moved fast. Waitresses rushed from table to table, balancing trays, calling out orders, forcing smiles even when their feet hurt and their patience was gone. They noticed him, of course. They always noticed new faces, but no one moved toward him. One waitress glanced at him while pouring water for another table. She frowned slightly and leaned toward her coworker. "That guy just came in," she whispered. "Looks like he's going to be a long one." Another waitress looked over quickly and shook her head. "I'm not taking him. I already have 3 tables and he doesn't look like he'll tip." A third waitress pretended not to see him at all. She wiped the counter again, even though it was already clean. Minutes passed. The man remained still, his eyes calmly observing the room. He noticed the laughter at one table, the quiet argument at another, the tired look on a young waitress's face as she carried a heavy tray. He noticed how often people looked at him and then looked away. He had seen this before, many times in many places. It was almost expected. He did not raise his hand or call out. He did not look angry. He simply waited. The restaurant manager stood behind the counter, counting receipts and checking the schedule for the next day. He noticed the man too, but decided not to interfere. The staff was already stressed, and one quiet customer did not seem important enough to cause trouble over. Someone would get to him eventually. Another 5 minutes passed. The man's stomach tightened slightly, but not from hunger. It was a familiar feeling, one that came when he allowed himself to step outside the world people expected him to live in. In boardrooms and offices, people rushed to greet him. They offered the best seats, the best food, the best attention. Here he was invisible. Or worse, unwanted. He leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. At a nearby table, a family laughed loudly as plates of food were set down in front of them. The waitress serving them forced a cheerful tone, but her eyes were tired. As soon as she finished, she glanced at the man in the corner and quickly looked away, pretending she had something else to do. The man checked his watch. He had time, plenty of it. His meeting had ended early and his flight was not until the next morning. He had come here on purpose, choosing this place instead of the hotel restaurant. He wanted something normal, something real. But reality, it seemed, had its own rules. Behind the scenes, the waitresses continued their quiet discussion. "I'm telling you he's going to complain," one said while grabbing clean glasses. "He hasn't even ordered yet," another replied. "Exactly, that's how it starts." One of them laughed softly. "You take him then?" "No way you do it." Their voices were low, but their meaning was clear. The man did not belong on anyone's list of priorities. He shifted slightly in his chair. A few customers noticed and felt a small moment of discomfort. Something about a man sitting alone, ignored, made people uneasy. It reminded them of how easily it could happen to anyone. Still, no one moved. The man's face remained calm, but his mind drifted. He thought about how many times he had heard speeches about respect, values, and humanity. He thought about how easily those words disappeared when money, status, or appearance changed. This was not anger he felt, but disappointment. A quiet, heavy disappointment. Another customer entered the restaurant, dressed in a sharp suit and speaking loudly into his phone. A waitress immediately rushed over, greeting him with a wide smile. "Right this way, sir." The man in the corner watched this without reaction. He did not envy the attention. He only noted the difference. A glass of water finally appeared on his table, placed there without a word by a passing waitress who did not stop or make eye contact. It was not kindness, it was obligation. "Thank you," the man said softly. She was already gone. The water sat untouched. He folded his hands again and waited. Time slowed in that strange way it does when one person is forgotten while everyone else rushes around. The restaurant noise blurred into a low hum. Plates clattered, chairs scraped, voices rose and fell. Yet at his table nothing happened. He could have stood up and left, many people would have, but he stayed. There was a reason for that. The man was not just any traveler. He was someone who had built companies from nothing, someone who had signed deals worth more money than this restaurant would see in years. He had learned long ago that the truest measure of people appeared when they believed no one important was watching. And right now, no one believed he was important at all. A young waitress at the far end of the room noticed him then. She had been busy refilling drinks, her apron stained and her feet aching. She followed his gaze for a moment and saw what others had chosen not to see, a man who had been sitting there far too long without service. She hesitated, but for now she did not move. The man in the corner took another slow breath, unaware that the quiet moment he was living through was about to change everything, not because of who he was, but because of who someone else would choose to be. And the restaurant, loud and ordinary, continued on, unaware that a simple table in the corner was holding the beginning of a story no one there would ever forget. The young waitress stood near the drink station, holding a tray that felt heavier than it should have. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and her head was full of worries she had been carrying for months. Rent was late again. Her phone bill reminder had come that morning. At home, her mother's medicine was running low. Every shift mattered, every small tip counted, and every mistake felt dangerous. She looked across the room once more and saw the man in the corner. He was still there, still waiting. His glass of water sat untouched, catching the light from above. Something about that bothered her, not because she thought he was important, but because he looked patient in a way that felt unfair. Most people would have complained by now, some would have shouted. He had done neither. Her coworker brushed past her. "Don't take that table," she said quickly without stopping. "He looks like trouble." The young waitress did not reply. She watched the man for another moment. He wasn't looking around angrily. He wasn't checking his phone. He was simply sitting, calm and quiet, as if he had accepted being forgotten. That was what finally pushed her. She didn't think about money. She didn't think about tips. She only thought about how it felt to be ignored when you already felt small in the world. She knew that feeling too well. She adjusted her apron, took a breath, and picked up a menu. As she walked toward the table, she felt the eyes of her coworkers on her back. Someone sighed. Someone else shook their head. The manager glanced up briefly, then returned to his paperwork. She stopped at the table and offered a simple smile. Not the forced kind, not the bright kind meant to impress, but a real one, tired but honest. "I'm sorry you had to wait," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "What can I get you tonight?" The man looked up at her, surprised, not by the words, but by the way she said them. There was no judgment in her eyes, no rush, no hidden irritation. "That's all right," he replied gently. "I understand it's busy." Something about his tone made her relax. She nodded and placed the menu in front of him, even though he had already been sitting there long enough to memorize the table. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be right here if you have any questions." She did not walk away immediately. She waited, giving him space without abandoning him. It was a small thing, but the man noticed. He glanced at the menu, then looked back up. "What do you recommend?" She thought for a moment. "If you're hungry, the grilled chicken is good. If you want something lighter, the soup is fresh today." "I'll take the soup," he said, "and some bread if that's okay." "Of course," she replied. "Would you like anything to drink besides water?" "Just coffee, please, black," she smiled again, coming right up. As she walked away, the man watched her. Not in the way people sometimes watched waitresses, but with quiet attention. He noticed how she moved quickly but carefully, how she didn't complain, how she didn't treat him like a burden. Behind the counter, one waitress raised an eyebrow. "You actually took him?" The young waitress shrugged while pouring coffee. "He's just a customer." The coffee machine hissed loudly. She flinched slightly, then laughed at herself. The sound had startled her, but she carried on. She brought the coffee over, placed it carefully on the table, and returned with the bread and soup a moment later. "Please let me know if you need anything else," she said. "Thank you," the man replied, "and thank you for serving me." She paused for half a second. "You're welcome," she said softly, then turned away. As she moved on to her other tables, the man began to eat. The soup was simple, warm, and comforting. He took slow bites, savoring not just the food, but the feeling of being treated like a regular person. No special attention. No fake kindness, just respect. After a few minutes, the waitress returned to check on him. "How is everything?" she asked. "It's very good," he said honestly. "You did a great job," she nodded. "I'm glad." There was something about the way she spoke that made conversation easy. Not too personal, not distant either, just natural. He asked, "Have you been working here long?" "Almost 2 years," she replied. "Feels longer some days," he smiled slightly. "I imagine." She hesitated, then added, "It's honest work. Some days are just harder than others." He understood that more than she knew. They spoke a little more small talk at first, about the weather, about how busy the restaurant had been lately. She did not complain. She did not pretend everything was perfect. She spoke the truth without bitterness. At one point, another waitress walked past and whispered, "You're brave." The young waitress ignored her. When the man finished his soup, she cleared the plate. "Would you like anything else?" "No, thank you," he said. This was enough. She brought the check and placed it face down on the table, as she did with everyone. "Take your time," she said again. As she stepped away, she noticed something strange. Her stress felt lighter. Serving this table hadn't drained her the way others did. If anything, it felt grounding. When she returned, the man was standing, putting on his jacket. He handed her the payment. She glanced at it and froze. There was far more money there than the bill required. She quickly shook her head and handed some of it back. "Sir, this is too much." He looked at her, surprised. "I meant it for you," she swallowed. "I appreciate it, but I can't take more than what's fair." He studied her face. There was no fear there, no hesitation, just honesty. "Then take what you believe is fair," he said. She took a small amount, just enough to be a good tip, and returned the rest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "Thank you." Around them, the restaurant continued as usual. No one noticed the moment for what it truly was. To everyone else, it was just a customer paying a bill. But for the man, it was something rare. As he walked toward the door, he glanced back once. The young waitress was already helping another table, moving quickly, focused, unaware that she had just left a lasting impression. He stepped outside into the cool evening air. For the first time that day, he felt something close to hope, not for himself, but for the world he often felt disconnected from. Inside, the young waitress exhaled and wiped her hands on her apron. She didn't know why, but she felt proud. Not because of the tip, but because she had done what felt right. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple decision, this quiet act of respect, had just set something much bigger in motion. The man left the restaurant that evening, but his mind lingered on the young waitress. It was strange. He had met many people in his life, countless strangers, yet something about her stayed with him. She had treated him with the kind of honesty and respect that was rare, almost extinct in his world. In his life as a CEO, people were polite, yes, but always calculating, always thinking about what they could gain. She had been different. Simple, quiet, human. He returned to his hotel room and sat by the window looking at the city lights. He often thought about people, about human nature, about how kindness and honesty could be found in unexpected places. He replayed the small conversation he had with the waitress, the way she spoke without fear. The way she corrected the bill without hesitation, even when he had offered her more money. Her calm presence seemed to cut through layers of pretense he was used to encountering. The next morning, he woke up early. He had a meeting scheduled with clients, but he found himself thinking of the small restaurant again. He wondered about the young waitress, about her life, about what she had been struggling with. For most people, he thought, she would have just been another server. But for him, she represented something rare. Integrity. He decided to return to the restaurant before leaving the city. It was a quiet morning when he arrived, the restaurant still setting up for the lunch crowd. The same young waitress was there, arranging condiments on the tables, tying her apron, moving with the same quiet determination he remembered. She looked up and froze for a moment when she saw him, recognizing the man she had served the day before. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, her voice cautious but calm. "Good morning," he replied, smiling faintly. He was not used to greeting people like this. Usually it was the other way around, everyone greeting him with awe or curiosity. But here he felt no need for pretense. He wanted only to connect with her, to acknowledge something she probably did not even realize she had done. He asked if he could sit at the same table again. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He sat quietly, folding his hands on the table just as he had the night before. He ordered a simple breakfast, eggs, toast, and coffee. But this time he was not alone in thought. He wanted to know more about her. "You were very kind yesterday," he said, not as a compliment but as a statement. "Most people would not have done what you did." She looked down at her hands. "I was just doing my job," she said softly. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "It was more than that. You treated me like a human being, not like a problem. That matters." She paused, unsure how to respond. People rarely said such things to her. In her life, respect and kindness were often conditional. She had grown used to people ignoring her or judging her based on what she could or could not do for them. But this man was different. His words were genuine, not influenced by money or status. They talked for a long while quietly. He asked about her life, not in a nosy way but out of curiosity. She shared small truths. She was working to support her family, paying bills she could barely afford, hoping to go back to school one day. She did not exaggerate or complain, only explain the reality of her life. He listened, not interrupting, not offering empty words. He asked questions that showed he wanted to understand, not judge. How long had she been working here? What were her dreams? What made her happy? Each answer she gave seemed to impress him more, not because it was unusual, but because it was honest. At one point, she laughed softly at a small story she told about a customer who had ordered a ridiculous number of desserts, and then complained about the taste. The sound was light and natural, and it made the man smile. It was a rare, human moment, one that reminded him why he often felt disconnected from the world of business and luxury he inhabited. "You have a good heart," he said finally, after she finished her story. She shook her head. "I don't know about that," she said. "I just try to do what's right." "That is exactly what makes a good heart," he replied. "It's not about fame or money, it's about integrity, honesty, treating people well when no one expects it." For a moment, silence filled the table. Around them, the restaurant slowly came to life with breakfast customers, the clatter of plates and silverware. But their conversation felt separate, as if time had slowed just for the two of them. "I've met a lot of people," he continued. "People who are famous, powerful, wealthy, and yet, I've rarely met anyone who carries themselves like you do. It's rare to see someone do the right thing when no one is watching." She looked down, feeling awkward. Praise was not something she was used to. She had grown up hearing that she had to prove herself constantly, that mistakes could be costly, and that effort often went unnoticed. This man, who could have demanded the best service anywhere, was recognizing her for being honest and kind without reward. "Why do you care?" she asked quietly, curiosity mixing with caution. He looked at her carefully. "Because it reminds me that the world is not entirely lost," he said. "Because people like you give hope, even when the world seems unfair." For the first time in a long while, she felt noticed, not for what she could do for someone, but for who she was. And for the man, speaking to her was different from every meeting, every deal, every speech he had ever given. There was no performance, no expectation, only truth. He shared a little about his life too, but in a way that did not feel like bragging. He spoke about the pressure of his work, the loneliness it sometimes brought, and the moments when he felt disconnected from ordinary life. She listened quietly, asking questions when appropriate, not letting him dominate the conversation. Hours seemed to pass like minutes. Breakfast had long been finished, but neither wanted to rush the moment. She brought him coffee refills and small gestures, a napkin, a smile, without making it feel like service. And he, in turn, treated her with a level of respect he had not shown to anyone in years. At one point, she mentioned her dream of going back to school. The idea of being able to study, to have a future different from the one she was born into, had always felt distant. He listened, nodded thoughtfully, and asked her about what she wanted to study and why. Her answers were simple, full of hope but realistic. "You should do it," he said, "and if there's any way I can help, I will." She laughed nervously, unsure if he meant it. People often said things they did not follow through on, but the sincerity in his eyes was clear. It was the same sincerity he had shown yesterday, the same quiet honesty. Before leaving, he stood and reached into his pocket. He placed a card on the table. "This is my contact," he said. "If you ever need advice, guidance, or help with your studies, call me. You have something rare. Don't let it go unnoticed." She held the card, feeling the weight of it. The numbers and name printed there represented more than money or power. They represented an opportunity, a bridge to a life she had only dreamed about. "I thank you," she said softly. Words felt small compared to what she wanted to express. He smiled, nodded, and walked toward the door. She watched him leave, a strange mix of excitement and disbelief filling her chest. The restaurant seemed quieter now, though it was busy. She sat back for a moment, looking at the empty table where he had sat. For the man, it had been a simple breakfast, a short conversation. For her, it was the beginning of something much bigger. She did not know it yet, but the honesty, kindness, and respect she had shown were about to change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Outside, he walked to his car, thinking of how rare it was to meet someone who reminded him of what mattered. Inside, she returned to her work, but her steps felt lighter. She felt seen. She felt valued. And for the first time in a long while, she felt that small acts of honesty and integrity could truly make a difference. That day, neither of them realized it, but a simple breakfast had planted the seeds of change. In quiet moments, in ordinary places, life often surprises us. A conversation, a smile, or a kind gesture can become the turning point in someone's story. The young waitress finished her shift later that morning, exhausted but smiling. She kept the card in her pocket, not knowing when or if she would use it, but treasuring it all the same. The restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm, the customers coming and going, the noise of plates and chairs filling the air. Yet for her, and for the man who had just left, the world felt a little brighter. And somewhere deep inside both of them, a quiet understanding had formed. That true connection is rare, honesty is powerful, and sometimes the simplest acts can create the strongest bonds. Days passed, but the man could not stop thinking about the young waitress. He returned to his busy life, filled with meetings, calls, and decisions that affected thousands of people. Yet, every time he sat in a boardroom or signed another contract, he remembered the calm, honest, and simple way she had treated him. Her presence had left an impression deeper than any compliment or handshake in his professional life. He realized that most people he met were motivated by money, power, or recognition. They were polite when it benefited them and cautious when it didn't. But she had shown a quiet courage, a simple truth that had been missing from his world. He thought about how rare it was to meet someone like that, and he knew he had to do more than just remember her. One morning, he made a decision. He would go back to the restaurant. Not for breakfast this time, not for a meal, but for a purpose he had been thinking about since the first encounter. When he arrived, the restaurant was busy, buzzing with voices, the smell of coffee and fried food mixing in the air. The young waitress was there, just as energetic and focused as before, moving from table to table with a determined calm. She noticed him as he walked in, and for a moment her heart skipped a beat. She had not expected to see him again so soon. Part of her felt nervous. Who was he really? What did he want this time? But his smile was gentle, familiar, and reassuring. He approached the counter and waited until she was free. "Hello again," he said softly. "May I speak with you for a moment?" She nodded, slightly confused but curious. She followed him to a quiet corner of the restaurant. He did not sit immediately. He looked at her with a steady gaze, as if searching for the right words. "I want to be honest with you," he began. "I have not met many people like you in my life. Honest, hardworking, and kind without expecting anything in return. You reminded me of something I had almost forgotten, that integrity matters, even when it is difficult." She listened quietly. Her life had not been easy, and she was used to people saying words without meaning them. But something in his tone and the calm way he spoke told her this was different. He was not praising her to impress anyone or to gain anything. He was speaking from the heart. "I know your life is not simple," he continued. "You work hard, you face challenges every day, and yet you carry yourself with dignity. I want to help you, not for recognition, not because I am wealthy, but because I believe in people like you." Her hands trembled slightly. She was not used to hearing such words. People rarely noticed her struggles, rarely acknowledged her effort, and rarely offered help without expecting something in return. For a moment, she was speechless. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything yet," he replied. "I just want you to listen." He reached into his pocket and took out a small envelope. "Inside this envelope," he said, "is a letter explaining an opportunity I would like to offer you. It is something that could change your life if you choose to accept it. You do not have to make a decision today or even tomorrow. Take your time. But I want you to know that your honesty and integrity have opened a door that is usually closed to most people." She took the envelope, her hands shaking slightly. She did not open it immediately. It felt unreal. The man standing in front of her, someone she had only known for a day, someone who could have ignored her entirely, was offering her a chance she had only dreamed about. I can't accept something like this," she said softly. I don't deserve it," he smiled gently. "You deserve it more than you think, not because of what you have, but because of who you are. Life will test you, and it often rewards the wrong people. But sometimes it rewards the ones who choose honesty, courage, and kindness, even when no one is watching. You are one of those people." Tears filled her eyes. She had spent so long believing that the world was unfair, that effort and integrity were often invisible. And here was someone, a man from another world entirely, telling her that she mattered, that her choices mattered, that her honesty had power. I don't know how to thank you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You don't need to," he replied. "The thanks is in the work you do every day, in how you live your life. That is already enough." He paused, looking around the restaurant. "I will be leaving soon," he said, "but I wanted to make sure you knew that your choices, your integrity, are not unnoticed. And I hope this opportunity helps you move toward the future you deserve. I believe in you." She finally opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter explaining that he was offering financial support for her education, access to mentors who could guide her career, and a personal guarantee that he would help connect her to opportunities she had never imagined. The letter was detailed, clear, and sincere. She could hardly believe what she was reading. She sat down for a moment, taking it all in. Her mind raced with possibilities. For the first time, a path forward felt open and real, not distant and impossible. The man watched her quietly, giving her space to absorb the moment. He did not rush her, did not demand a reaction. He simply waited. After a long silence, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears and gratitude. I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have imagined." "You don't have to say anything," he said again. "Just promise me that you will continue to live with integrity, that you will keep being honest, kind, and courageous. That is more important than any opportunity or money. Nothing else lasts if you lose that." She nodded, feeling the weight and truth of his words. She realized that this moment was not just about receiving help. It was about being recognized for who she truly was. It was a reminder that her choices mattered, that her life could change because of the decisions she made each day. As he left the restaurant that day, the staff and customers did not fully understand what had happened. To them, it was just another customer leaving. But the young waitress knew differently. She held the letter close, feeling a mix of hope, excitement, and responsibility. She knew that life would not suddenly become easy, but she also knew that her honesty and courage had opened a door that might never close. In the days that followed, she began to plan. She reached out to mentors mentioned in the letter, started preparing for the next steps in her education, and thought carefully about the choices she would make in her work and personal life. Every small decision now carried a new weight. She felt more confident, not because someone had given her help, but because someone had seen her worth and trusted her to use it wisely. The man, meanwhile, returned to his own life, but he carried a quiet satisfaction with him. He had seen many people in his life, but very few had left an impression like hers. Her honesty, her courage, her simple decency reminded him why he had worked so hard, not for wealth, but to have the ability to make a difference. He realized that sometimes the greatest impact comes from recognizing the small acts of integrity that others take for granted. And somewhere, quietly, their lives were both shifting. For her, it was a chance to move forward, to achieve dreams she had almost given up on. For him, it was a reminder of what truly matters in a world often obsessed with power and money. The young waitress would never forget that day. The encounter had changed her not only materially, but emotionally and spiritually. She learned that the smallest act of honesty could attract opportunities, that integrity was powerful, and that even in a world that often seemed unfair, there were people who recognized the truth of character. And for the man, it was proof that despite wealth, status, and influence, real human connection and integrity were what truly mattered. That day at the restaurant, the story of two strangers, a simple breakfast, and a conversation about honesty had created a ripple that would shape both of their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and life at the restaurant carried on much as it always had. The young waitress continued her shifts, moving quickly between tables, carrying trays of food, pouring coffee, and offering smiles to customers. But something inside her had shifted. Every step she took, Every action she made felt a little different. She held herself taller, walked with more confidence, and carried a quiet sense of hope that had been missing from her life for years. She kept the envelope the man had given her clothes. On breaks, she would take it out and read the letter again. Each time, the words seemed to grow in meaning. They were not just about financial support or educational opportunity. They were about faith in her, about recognition that her honesty, her integrity, and her courage mattered in ways the world often ignored. She thought about the chance to continue her education, to learn new skills, to explore possibilities she had only ever dreamed of. The path ahead seemed real now, no longer distant or impossible. Her coworkers noticed a change in her too. The young waitress moved differently, her demeanor calmer yet more determined. She spoke to customers with the same natural warmth she had always had, but now there was a quiet confidence that drew people in. When a difficult customer complained or tried to push her buttons, she handled it with patience and poise. Even the restaurant manager noticed, asking her one day, "You seem different lately. Happier, I mean." "Did something happen?" She smiled, but did not answer directly, knowing some things were meant to remain private. Meanwhile, the man who had changed her life continued with his own busy schedule. Meetings, calls, and travel filled his days, but he found himself thinking of the waitress frequently. He often reflected on their conversations, on her honesty, and on the way she had treated him without expectation or judgment. For him, it was a rare reminder of what truly mattered in life. He had spent decades building companies, signing deals, and managing people. But it was moments like these, quiet and human, that left the deepest impressions. Back at the restaurant, the young waitress began taking steps toward her future. She reached out to the mentors named in the letter. She applied for courses that would help her build new skills and expand her opportunities. Each application, each email, each phone call reminded her that she had been seen, that someone believed in her, and that she had the power to change her life if she stayed true to herself. The community around her began to notice changes as well. Regular customers who had seen her struggle and work tirelessly began commenting on her calm confidence, her efficiency, and the way she treated everyone with respect. New customers remarked on the warmth and professionalism she exuded. Even small acts, helping a child reach a high chair, carrying an elderly customer's tray carefully, or simply listening patiently to someone's story, began to stand out more than ever before. Her quiet integrity had become visible in ways she had never imagined. She also started saving carefully, planning for the future she had only dreamed about before. With each small step, the sense of hopelessness that had weighed her down for years began to lift. She began to believe in herself in a way she never had before. And through it all, she never forgot the man who had given her that first chance. The man who had seen her, recognized her value, and trusted her to make the right choices. Word of the story began to spread quietly. The restaurant manager, impressed by her transformation, shared with the staff how she had handled a particularly challenging customer with grace and honesty, even under pressure. Other waitresses and servers began to look at her differently. Some came to her for advice on how to handle difficult situations. Some quietly expressed their admiration for her courage and integrity. She became an example of what it meant to do the right thing, even when no one was watching, and even when life seemed unfair. Months later, the young waitress began her first formal course toward her education goals. She was nervous at first, entering a new world, surrounded by people she didn't know, learning skills she had never imagined she could master. But she persevered. Each lesson, each assignment, each success reminded her that the man's faith in her was not misplaced. She discovered a passion for learning, for growth, and for achieving something greater than she had ever dreamed possible. And in the quiet moments between classes, during breaks at the restaurant, or on her long walks home, she reflected on the truth of what had happened. She realized that her life had not changed because someone gave her money or opportunity. It had changed because someone recognized her value, believed in her, and treated her with respect. That recognition, that human connection, had sparked a transformation that no amount of luck or chance could have achieved alone. Meanwhile, the man continued to follow her progress quietly, checking in occasionally, offering advice, encouragement, and guidance. He never interfered directly, never imposed, never demanded. but he celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and reminded her when needed that integrity, honesty, and courage were always worth protecting. He saw in her a reflection of the values he cherished, the quiet strength of human goodness, the kind of integrity that changes lives not with wealth or power, but with consistent, truthful action. Eventually, the young waitress reached milestones she had only dreamed about, completing courses, earning certifications, and preparing to enter a career she had once thought impossible. Each achievement was a triumph, not just of skill, but of perseverance, character, and belief in herself. She often thought back to the day he had first sat at her table, and how her simple decision to serve him had set off a chain of events that changed her life forever. Her transformation inspired others too. She mentored younger coworkers, showing them that hard work, honesty, and kindness were noticed, even when it seemed like no one cared. She shared her story quietly, not for attention, but to remind others that integrity matters. Customers, coworkers, and friends began to see her as more than just a waitress. They saw her as someone who embodied resilience, honesty, and hope. The restaurant itself benefited in subtle ways. The young waitress's positive energy and example lifted the morale of the staff. Service became smoother, customers noticed the genuine care and respect, and even small conflicts among staff were resolved more easily. One day, the manager called her over and said, "You've changed this place. People feel it. It's like you bring a calm strength that everyone notices." She smiled quietly, knowing that her growth was not about recognition, but about living her life with integrity. Years later, the young waitress looked back at that time with gratitude and awe. What had seemed like an ordinary day, a man sitting quietly at a corner table, a simple breakfast and a conversation, had turned into the defining moment of her life. The choices she had made, small and honest, had opened doors she never knew existed. And the recognition, trust, and guidance she had received had transformed her future in ways she could never have imagined. For the man, the encounter remained just as meaningful. He often reflected on how a simple act, being treated with honesty and respect by someone who expected nothing, reminded him why he worked so hard to make a difference in the world. He realized that wealth, influence, and power were temporary, but integrity, human connection, and the quiet courage of ordinary people created ripple effects that could last a lifetime. And so, their story became one not just about opportunity or luck, but about the power of kindness, integrity, and recognition. One small act of honesty had set off a chain of events that transformed two lives forever. The young waitress achieved her dreams, but she never forgot the lessons she had learned. That true value lies in character, that honesty matters more than appearances, and that courage sometimes means simply doing the right thing when no one is watching. The man, meanwhile, continued his work and travels, but he carried with him the knowledge that one small, human act had changed the course of a life. It reminded him that even in a world focused on success and money, real impact comes from noticing, valuing, and believing in people who choose integrity. And in the quiet moments, when the restaurant was empty, when the sun cast soft light through the windows, the young waitress would pause and remember the day her life changed. A simple breakfast, a kind word, and a moment of recognition had shown her that the world could be fair, that people could be good, and that her life was worth investing in, not just by others, but by herself. Her story spread quietly through the community, not as a tale of fame, but as an inspiration. It reminded everyone who heard it that honesty, integrity, and courage are never wasted, and that sometimes the simplest human connections can create the most profound changes. And so both lives were forever altered, one through the courage to act with honesty and kindness, the other through the wisdom to recognize and nurture it. In the end, their story was proof that even small actions, when guided by integrity and respect, can leave a lasting impact on the world, one life at a time.